What happens when we die? I mean, it's the one question that connects every single person on this planet, right? For literally thousands of years. We've had our stories, our beliefs, our faiths. We were pretty sure we had the answer. But it turns out we were wrong. And I don't mean a little bit wrong. Groundbreaking new science is proving we were catastrophically wrong. The truth, well, it's way more profound, way more complex, and honestly, it's more terrifying than anything we could have ever imagined. And look, this isn't some philosophical debate. This is cold, hard data. Data that is literally rewriting medical textbooks right now as we speak. Because it turns out death isn't just an off switch. It's an explosion of consciousness. You know, for so long, we've thought of death as the end of the book, the final page. But what if it's not? What if it's actually the start of the most intense, mind-bending chapter you could possibly imagine? Okay, so let's dive in. Our story starts in a Michigan hospital back in 2019. Everything seems totally normal until a patient dies, and in doing so, defies everything we thought we knew about death itself. So the time of death is called. The patient's heart has stopped beating. It's over. But one doctor, Jima Borjajan, is staring at the brain monitor, and she sees something that just shouldn't be possible. Get this. For a full 30 seconds after the heart was completely still, the patient's brain didn't just flicker. It erupted. A literal storm of these things called gamma waves. The most intense, most organized burst of brain activity ever recorded in a human being, ever. And just like that, one event shattered a central pillar of medicine. The idea that when you die, your brain just fades to black? Nope. It ignites. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, maybe that was just a one-off, a freak accident. But it wasn't. In fact, it gives us a brand new scientific lens to look at thousands of those near-death experiences that for decades were just written off as hallucinations. Let me introduce you to Dr. Sam Parnia at NYU. He spent 20 years, 2 decades, on one of the biggest studies of its kind looking at cardiac arrest survivors. We're talking more than 2,000 cases from all over the world. And the results? Absolutely staggering. Check this out. Almost half of the people who were revived, 40%, they reported having clear, lucid memories from the time they were clinically dead. I mean, no heartbeat and supposedly no brain function. And we're not talking about fuzzy dreams here. These people recalled specific, verifiable details from inside the operating room. Conversations between doctors, the sounds of machines. Things they could not possibly have known through their physical senses. But there's one case that just blows everything out of the water. A patient is revived, right? And he tells the doctors that while he was out, he was floating above his body and saw a single shoe on a very specific corner of the hospital roof. Impossible, right? So what did they do? They checked. And the shoe was there, exactly where he said it was. This is the kind of hard evidence that suggests consciousness might not need the brain to be online to work. So what in the world is the brain actually doing in those final moments? How is any of this even possible? Well, new research is painting a picture that is, honestly, just stunningly beautiful and surprisingly organized. So scientists monitored rats as their hearts stopped. And what they found was incredible. The brain doesn't just fizzle out randomly. No, it enters this state of hypersynchronization. The part that sees, the part that remembers, the part that feels. They all start firing together in this perfect, complex harmony. It's like an orchestra hitting a final, magnificent chord. And here's the kicker. The only other time we've ever seen the brain this synchronized, it's in the minds of master Tibetan monks during deep meditation. Think about that. In its final seconds, the dying brain naturally achieves a state of consciousness that takes a lifetime of practice to even approach. But it gets even weirder. So many survivors talk about time just breaking. It either stops completely or stretches out into what feels like an eternity. And a recent study found out why. The brain's internal clock, the parts that process time, they go into what's called temporal dilation mode. Basically, your experience of time completely detaches from the clock on the wall. So what does that mean? It means that in the minute and a half it might take for a doctor to officially pronounce someone dead, the brain could be processing what feels like an entire lifetime. Your whole life, your memories, your loves, all experienced in a few moments. An eternity packed into a minute. Okay, but there's another piece to this puzzle, a really mysterious one. It's a chemical key, something mystics have talked about for ages. Something that might just unlock a gateway to a whole other reality. And in 2019, science finally proved it. Our brains, they make their own DMT. And guess when the pineal gland releases a massive flood of it? During moments of extreme stress, like the process of dying. And when you compare the stories, it is absolutely mind-blowing. People who have had near-death experiences and people who have taken DMT, they describe the exact same things. A tunnel of light, seeing geometric patterns, feeling their ego dissolve, it's identical. It really suggests that the experience of death might just be the most profound psychedelic journey the brain can possibly create. But what if it's not just the brain? What about the cases that even a surge of brain activity and a flood of chemicals can't explain? The cases that point to something even bigger? Let's talk about something called terminal lucidity. This might be the most baffling thing in all of medicine. The NIH has documented over 200 cases of this. It's when people with brains that have been totally ravaged by diseases like Alzheimer's just suddenly reboot. Just try to imagine this. A family member, maybe a parent, lost to dementia for years. They don't know who you are. And then, just hours before they pass away, they sit up in bed, look you right in the eye, call you by name, and they are completely back. They talk, they share memories, they say a real goodbye, and then they're gone. Science has zero explanation for this. How can a brain that's physically degenerated just start working perfectly again? It forces you to ask a really wild question. What if our whole model is wrong? What if the brain doesn't produce consciousness? What if it's more like a radio receiver? And as that receiver starts to break down at the end of life, the static clears. And for a moment, a pure, unfiltered signal of consciousness finally gets through. Which brings us back to where we started. Remember that patient in Michigan? The one whose brain lit up the monitors of that impossible gamma wave explosion? Well, there's one final crucial detail to her story. Against all odds, after 4 full minutes of being clinically dead, her heart started again. She was resuscitated. She survived. She became the first person in history to have this hyperconscious death state recorded on a monitor and then come back to talk about it. So, of course, the doctors rushed to her side. What did you see? What did you experience during those 4 minutes? What do you remember? And her answer was simple and absolutely chilling. She just looked at them and said, I remember everything. They pushed her for more, of course. Everything. What is everything? What did you see? But she just smiled, and she refused to ever say another word about it. Whatever she saw, whatever she learned, she took that secret with her. So, the science has brought us right to the edge of an incredible mystery. It shows us that death isn't an ending. It's a transition, a doorway into a state of awareness more heightened than anything in life. Which leaves the final, ultimate question not for scientists, but for you. After all this, what do you think happens when we die?